Today for our daily cancellation, I will be canceling women. Not all women, don't worry. In fact, if you are a woman, I hope that you do not fall into the category of being canceled this afternoon. I am canceling women who have a tendency to claim that relatively normal yet uncomfortable or irritating social interactions are sexist. Now, I suppose I could simplify by saying I'm canceling feminists, but I think that there may be some women who don't identify as feminists and yet still fall into this trap. So now, look, I'm not talking here about things, words, behaviors that are actually abusive or degrading to women. In fact, just this week, we've discussed the latest Cardi B song, which is intensely degrading and dehumanizing to women. Yes, it was a woman who produced it, but even so, it amounts to an attack on the dignity of women, and there's plenty of this sort of thing in the culture, and if you're a woman who has spoken out about that, God bless you. To you, I say girl power. I will join you at the protest march for that. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm referring to here are, as I said, the more ordinary, everyday, social interaction-based sexism claims. If you want examples of this kind of thing, just go to Google and type in sexist microaggressions or everyday sexism or similar keywords. You'll be greeted with volumes and volumes just like this. One random example from Yahoo Finance. This is just, one article that popped up of many. And the headline, why sexist microaggressions are holding women back at work. So just reading a little bit of this, it says around 64% of women are exposed to this kind of discrimination, according to the report, with Black and lesbian women facing an even greater variety of microaggressions in the workplace. And then it continues. So what are examples of microaggressions experienced by women? That's a very good question. According to the Women in the Workplace report, the most common issue is women having to provide more evidence of their competence than men, and they are more likely to have their judgment questioned, even on things that they're an expert in. And then the article goes into anecdotes from various women. Here's one. It says, one Asian woman who had worked 4 years at a company told the report authors of her experience of a microaggression. She said, I was in an elevator and pressed the button for the executive office. Someone said to me, no, honey, that's for the executive offices. The interns are going to this floor. That's not funny, but another Middle Eastern woman, the vice president of a company, added, I walked into a meeting where I was the only woman in a very large room of men. And when I sat down, an older white man from another company turned to me out of nowhere and said, could you take notes for the meeting? Which was a little bit odd because I was the lawyer in the room, the one doing the negotiating. Okay, so and then it goes into other anecdotes and so on and so forth. And then it stipulates, importantly, microaggressions can be hard to pinpoint. They might be brief comments or small actions, such as interrupting or talking over someone in a meeting. No matter what form they come in, microaggressions can have a serious impact and create a toxic working environment. They might seem innocuous, but over time, these incidents and comments can lead to self-esteem, or rather to low self-esteem, feelings of alienation, and impact on mental health. All right. So a few classic examples there of alleged microsexism that you find. There are other classics that you've no doubt heard. Being told to smile is one. Women will sometimes complain that others remark on their lack of smiling, and they'll chalk that up to sexism. Of course, there's the old favorite, mansplaining. And mansplaining is any time a man explains something in a condescending or patronizing way. I'm doing mansplaining right now, in fact. Unwelcome advice, a cousin of mansplaining is another example. So questioning of judgment, interrupting, talking over, telling a woman to smile, explaining things, doling out advice, unwelcome touching, unwelcome flirting. All of these are commonly considered sexism. And they're used to promote this narrative of a patriarchal and male privileged society. But it's all bogus. Almost entirely bogus. Might there be some occasions where a man interrupts or explains or says you should smile more because he has a low opinion of women? Sure, I suppose so. I can't see inside anybody's mind. I don't know. What I do know is this, that all of these things, all that I just listed, all of these supposed sexist anti-woman aggressions, however micro they may be, happen to men all the time. All the time. None of this is unique to women, nor is there any credible reason to assume that they're experienced more often by women. All we know, and save yourself the trouble of sending me links to studies. Look at the studies! The studies say! The studies have declared! All we know is that women more often report and remember these incidents and interpret them as sexism. What we do not know is that women actually experience these events more often. And I submit that there's no good reason to assume they do. Now, this is all anecdotal, of course, but all of this is the claims from feminists are anecdotal. It's all anecdotal. So let me add my own anecdote, okay? I am told to smile all the time. I have just never cared enough to make note of it or of any specific incident and to store it away in my head as a traumatic sexist experience, because ultimately I don't care what other people think of my demeanor or my personality. A lot of people hate me and hate my demeanor and personality. Fine, doesn't matter to me. Your opinion of me is irrelevant. I don't care. What about being talked over? What about being interrupted, condescended to? Men experience that all the time, all of that. Though men who learn to assert themselves will experience it less, but that's true for women too. The point is that if you have a more submissive personality, you're more likely to be ignored or overridden, especially in a work environment, in a competitive environment. That's not an anti-woman thing. That's a human society thing, like it or not. What about unwelcome advice? Are you kidding me? I would wager here that 95% of all the unwelcome advice given in a day across the world, cumulatively, is supplied by women. Now, this is partly a positive reflection of women, though. Women give advice, nag we used to call it, for the same reason that they gossip. It's the downside of the more positive attributes more common in women, of sensitivity and empathy. Women are more likely to care what other people are doing, thinking, saying, and feeling. Yes, this can lead them to gossip, it can lead them to nag, but can also lead them to be wonderfully caring and invested in other people and very empathetic. Now, men, we're less likely to care all that much about what other people do. The plus side is that we don't nag very often, we're less prone to gossip. But the negative side is that we can sometimes lack sensitivity, we can lack empathy, we can perhaps err on the side of indifference more often than we should. This is a difference between the sexes, and one of the reasons why our differences are complementary, and one of the reasons why it's so great to have a mom and dad in the home to balance each other out. You need sort of both sides of this. But the point here is simply that because of the masculine and feminine tendencies just described, some of this everyday sexism is far more likely to come from women. So why does it seem like women experience these things more? How could it be possible that somehow men have become known in modern society as the nagging busybodies, while women are suddenly the aggrieved and frustrated victims of this behavior? I mean, it's absurd. Well, I think it has a lot to do with another difference between men and women. Men only articulate about 10% of their emotions and experience. For women, the number is closer to 225%. These are not scientific figures, I admit, but the point is that men don't talk as much about what they're feeling and going through, and are especially unlikely to go home and tell their wives elaborate stories about, being interrupted at a meeting or being told to smile and how upset it made them. Not because it doesn't happen, but because, for one thing, a man might feel embarrassed that he was emasculated and therefore be more likely, if anything, to tell a story about some other incident in the day when he was assertive and in control, just to assuage his bruised ego. Also, he won't bring it up because men are more practical, even about emotional matters, and admittedly to a fault sometimes. So a man will calculate in his mind whether the story about his day is actually useful or relevant to anyone, and if he decides that it isn't, he won't say it. Women don't perform those calculations as often, for better or worse. Now, that's where the confusion comes from. It is, like so much of the confusion between the sexes, a matter of miscommunication or lack of communication. And now I'm starting to sound like my wife, who, for the record, has never in her life said the phrase microaggression or even sexism, unironically. I don't think I've ever heard her call anything sexist ever, which is awesome. And so this time, she is not the one being canceled, but a bunch of other women are, I'm afraid, being canceled, which I'm sure they will hasten to say is sexist on my part. So be it. The cancellation stands. Hey, you, you right there. Hit the subscribe button right now. Do it right now. I thank you for your compliance. It's somewhat appreciated.